Well, joining us now from Cairo is Abdullah Schleifer, a political analyst from the American University in Cairo. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, a lot of scepticism about some of what George Bush was saying there, but let's just look at what he was talking about. He said that his Middle East policies had been ambitious in vision, they were bold in action. I mean, he did come up with Annapolis, he did talk about a two-state solution. So what do you make of that assessment?
Well, his policies certainly were bold and ambitious, and they were also failures. And his remarks are extraordinary. It's like a speech in praise of failure. It's as if he's reverted to type. He talked about Syria and Iran in the same old context of, if you're not with us, you're against us. Rather than, he's speaking, by the way, to Brookings Institute, which is one of several important think tanks in Washington, which have come out and declared that President-elect Obama should immediately open direct talks with Syria and with Iran. And there was no reference to negotiations. Again, the whole role of diplomacy, of negotiations, is on the back burner as far as President Bush was concerned for the past 8 years, and he's going out of office on that same position.
What interested me was that he seemed surprised by some issues which would have been obvious to a lot of people, that the Iraq war turned out to be longer and more expensive than expected, that there'd been key setbacks in the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. I mean, surely his advisors factor some of those things in.
Surely, in his talk, the one modification he made was, he said, well, it took us longer and we had some bad intelligence. But the bad intelligence was of his own creation. The intelligence agencies, the senior operatives at CIA were saying that the evidence is inconclusive. But in the Defense Department, the neoconservatives who sort of took over government policy after 9/11 created their own intelligence operation specifically to cherry pick and forward raw data with which the CIA and the State Department were very suspicious of, and that was the data that was used to justify that invasion and that occupation, which has been disastrous. He talks about less terrorism. It generated terrorism, and that terrorism is still going on. I mean, certainly the opportunities that were present in Afghanistan were lost and abandoned when all attention was shifted to the invasion and occupation of Iraq, and the situation has been worse. Iraq has been convulsed by terrorism, now Mumbai. I mean, it's just been going on. So I think his whole reading is a sort of hopeless attempt at vindication.
So this idea that the Middle East is somehow a freer and more hopeful place, I mean, you presumably think that's baloney?
Well, I certainly think it's false. It's erroneous. I don't know if I necessarily attribute to a delicatessen item like bologna, but yeah, look at Palestine. The one thing to his credit was, prior to 9/11, he was going to go public at the UN and declare as the first president for a two-state solution, a Palestine state. And he eventually got around to doing it. But there was no follow-through, just the opposite. When Sharon launched a major offensive into the West Bank to destroy the Palestinian Authority on the basis of attacks that were not coming from the Palestine Authority, but coming from Hamas, he ignored all that and he endorsed Sharon as a man of peace.
So where does this leave President-elect Obama then? Because he's now going to have to carry on forward from all this.
Yes, well, what it means is that, you know, it's a curious statement, because in the past 2 years, the administration has been inching away from this perspective. Many of the people who are responsible for the Iraqi debacle and for the hard line on Iran, you know, again, it's common knowledge in Washington that the Iranians, under their previous administration, under President Khatami, were prepared to negotiate everything with America, everything. And his administration spurned it. They didn't even respond to the letter they received saying that. All right, but in the last year or two, there have been certain measures, like a readiness to talk directly, be involved directly in talks with North Korea, a certain readiness to sit at least at the same table with the Iranians in talking about Iraqi security. That's been over the past 2 years. But with this talk now, it's almost as if he's drifting back to the post-9/11 Bush. He's very defensive, and he's making statements about the situation in the Middle East which have nothing to do with reality. President Obama-elect, has spoken out on several occasions indicating that he's going to engage in a dramatic change of course. And I think given the mood in Washington with think tanks like the Brookings Institute, the Council on Foreign Affairs, the U.S. Muslim Engagement Project, all of them coming out and saying we've got to get back to diplomacy, I think that's going to happen.
OK, good to get your thoughts there. Abdullah Schleifer speaking to us live from Cairo there.